All right, so it is 11 and we're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar Wednesday session. Thank you all for joining me for talking about mail merge, specifically using Word and Excel. At this point, you should be hearing audios. Let me just chat that at this point here. A couple of housekeeping things that I want to go over before we start the session. First is that you may have seen it pop up, but just to make a verbal note of it as well, we are recording today's session. Once the session is completed, then we are going to upload it to our YouTube channel, and I have the link here as well. So all of the Webinar Wednesday series of recordings are going to be located here, as well as some additional information. So welcome again. My name is Tennille Fincham, and I'm a technology instructor with KUIT. We talked about the recording, but another thing to help get you set up today is just using Zoom in general. So I have a few tips that will make the experience a bit better. One is to make sure you have your microphone muted. It looks like everyone does at this point. When we are asking questions, if you have questions during the session, you can either chat within the chat panel, or if you want, you can unmute your microphone and chat in that way. Just make sure that once you're done asking your question or talking, whatever, that you mute your microphone again, and this will just help to cut down on any extraneous feedback. The second is I am going to be sharing my screen today to show you the multiple options for creating mail merge files. So if you expand your window, then you'll be able to see as much of my screen as possible. And then the third thing that will be helpful for today is to open both the chat and the participant panel. The chat is where you can ask questions during the session, and the participant panel is going to show a couple of things. One, it's a place where you can mute, unmute, but the other thing that's going to show up there is what's called nonverbal feedback. So I'll be asking for your feedback throughout today's session to see if we are good to move on to a subject or if we need to take a little bit more time to talk about that concept. So I'm going to be asking you to respond using this nonverbal feedback menu, and that's located at the bottom of the participants panel. So again, to participate in the session, it's number 3 here on the list, to have the manage participants panel open and then the chat panel. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about an introduction to mail merge. We'll talk about getting yourself set up with your files to have mail merge work successfully. We'll talk about creating different types of mail merge files in Word and adding those fields from an existing Excel workbook of lists of information. We'll talk about rules, and then we'll talk about making any changes to your list within Excel, what to do, some best practices there. And then we'll finish the session with talking about how to finish your files and get them ready to send or print. And then throughout the session here, we'll have questions, but there will be some dedicated time at the end as well for any additional questions that you may have. All right, so with that, what is mail merge? It's a way to create multiple personalized items all at once within Word, and you can use existing data that you may already have within Excel. So this data could be lists of addresses that you have for vendors. It could be lists of past students or current students that you have in your programs. Examples of mail merge files could include things like personally addressed letters or emails to each one of those students or vendors. You can also choose to create individual PDF files that you could then print out and give to someone. You could attach it in an email, whatever you choose to do there. And then you can also use mail merge to create address labels from that existing information. So it really does help you create these multiple personalized items much faster as opposed to having to type all of that information again into Word. I do want to do a quick poll just to get an idea of today's audience. So let me bring that up here. Okay, so my question for you all today is, have you used mail merge to create documents previously? And there's a few answers to choose from. Okay, cool. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. It looks like most individuals are new to using mail merge, which is perfect. Hopefully you'll get some ideas of how to start using that, and it makes more sense after today's session. Great. Okay, so I want to talk about getting yourself set up before you even start creating these mail merge files. And the first place to start with this is actually in Excel. So what you'll do is you'll open up your list of items, the list of addresses that you have, the list of students that you have, employees that you have, etc. You're going to want to make sure that each column has a column heading, and that your column heading or that your column title is something that makes sense to you and something that is easy to identify the content that's in that column and that it's unique. So examples of things of column names could be like first name, last name, address, phone number, email, things like that, the information that you're tracking about each of these individuals. The reason why you want to create these column labels or titles is because these column names are what you use directly to create your mail merge files. So if you have things named like column 1, column 4, it's going to be really tedious to have to figure out what information is used in each one of those random column headings and then try to figure out what you need to add to your file. The other thing here is to remove any completely empty records, any completely empty rows, and any empty columns. The way that mail merge works is by going down a list of names or records that you have, and when it comes to a blank row, then it considers that that list is complete. So if you have a blank row in the middle of your data set, you may not have all of the mail merge files created for you because it won't go down to the next record to figure out that there's more after that. And then the last thing here that you can do as well is to remove any duplicate records if needed within Excel. If you have multiple lists in one workbook, so if you have like a worksheet that's called 2018 students and then one that's like 2017, 2016, etc., you might want to create those lists as named ranges because that will just help you select the correct list for your mail merge file. All right, so I want to take a quick pause there. Questions for me on what mail merge is or some things that you can do in Excel to help get set up for success. If we are all good to move on in your participant panel, I'm going to have you choose the yes button. Cool. Perfect. Cool. All right. Getting set up in Word, there are a few ways you can start out for the mail merge files. I usually suggest to start with just a new blank document. With that blank document, then you're going to enter text, be it that you copy and paste that you type it, whatever. You're going to enter the text that will be the static information, the information that will be on every letter that you send out. You're going to want to style that and format it within your file. So that's the first thing to do in Word. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 3 different scenarios here. I'm going to show you the completed file, and then we'll talk about how I actually got there, and I'll show you how to set these up. The first scenario is that you need to send out letters that are personalized and addressed to each past student in your program. And the assumption here is that you already have that existing list, including those addresses, somewhere in an Excel file. So let me show you what this completed thing looks like. So our final goal is to have something that looks like this, where we have the student's name and address at the top, followed by a deer and their name addressed specifically to them. And the hope is that it will pull in all the information that I have on this worksheet. So this worksheet, I've done the setup like I've talked about, where I have each of the columns named something unique and identifiable, and each individual person is located on a new row. And there's no empty records in between. We just have straight data from each of our individuals. So the hope is to have each one of these letters in Word be addressed specifically to those 10 individuals. So that's the final goal of this. I would say the other goal of this specific one, just because I want to show you some layout options, is that in these letters that we want to send, we want to have the recipient information listed along the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, equidistance apart, I want to have the sender information listed. So I'm going to show you a way that you can set that up as well. Okay, so this is our final goal of what we're going to create. So I want to show you from scratch how to create this type of file. All right, so let me just, I'm going to say that this is the information that I want to use. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to start out with a new blank file. So I'm going to say File, New, Blank Document. Okay, so that's the first thing in Word. Now again, I can type in the information that I want to remain static. So I know that I want it to always begin with deer. So I can type that in. You can also just paste in the data. So this is just the information that I had in the last letter. It's been approved. It's gone through all those channels, etc. So this is the information that I want to send out. Okay, so the last thing that we have to do here is that at the top, I wanted to have both the recipient and the sender address. So I'm going to press enter just a couple of times here. A way to format this in a very easy and precise way is to actually insert a table. So here I can say insert table. I want to have 3 columns because I want a column for the left-hand side information and a column for the right-hand side information. And that center column is how I'm going to know that there's equidistance between all of those values, essentially. And then I'm going to go with multiple rows because I want to have things like name, address, city, state, school, etc. So I'm going to add in some additional rows here. Now, we're not going to fill out the recipient information yet. We're only going to fill out the information that will be static, the information that's going to appear on every letter. And that happens to be the sender information. So in the right-hand side of the column, I'm going to enter the sender information. So Tennille Fincham, I'm going to say school, say KU, School of Awesome. The address, put in the Sunnyside address here. I'll say Lawrence. And then maybe I also want an email address. Cool. Okay, so I filled out all of the static information. I want every single thing on this page to be shown on every single letter. What I need to do now is connect this Word document with my Excel file so that I can actually pull in the specific information for each one of these individuals. And here's how I do that. Within Word, you're going to click on the Mailings tab at the top, so Mailings. Now, we've already essentially started our mail merge here because we've started just a blank document. So when you choose Start Mail Merge, you can just leave this selected as normal Word document because we just started with a blank normal Word document. There's only going to be one instance today where I show you to actually start from this selection instead, and we'll talk about why it's a good idea to do that. For this purpose, you can start with just a blank Word document, and under your Start Mail Merge, you can leave this as normal Word document. Okay, so the next thing then is to select that list of recipients. So I have a few options here. I can type a new list. I can choose from Outlook contacts, or in my case, I have an Excel file of a list. So I'm going to say use an existing list. Next, I'm going to browse to the location where that list is. And it's okay if the list is open. It's also okay if the list is closed. So I'm going to browse to where I have that list. Here it is. And choose Open. It's going to show you the worksheets that are in the file. Mine just happens to have one worksheet, and it's titled Sheet 1. So I want to make sure I choose the sheet that I want to use. And then at the bottom, you do want to make sure if you have column names that this is selected. It usually is, but just double check it where it says first row of data contains column headers. Those are those column names like first name, last name, etc. So you want to make sure that's checked. And then we'll click OK. All right, so at this point, all that it's done is that it's connected that file for me to start using, but it doesn't know what information I want to pull until I tell it to insert these merge fields. These merge fields are the names of the columns that are within your worksheet. And these column names tell this connection to use the information located under these column headings. So for this first part here, I want to make sure that after dear that I have the specific individual's first name and last name. I want both of those fields to be created. After dear, however, I want there to be a space. So I'm going to do dear space, and then I'm going to say insert merge field. Now, I could add multiple here, but I just so happen to have a column titled first name, last name. So I'm going to use that. Now what you'll see, because we're in edit mode here, is just the name of the column. But if you press preview under the mailings tab, it will show you the information that it's pulled from this first name, last name column. All right, so the other thing that I want to set up here, I'm going to take preview results off here. The other thing that I want to set up here is the recipient address. So I'm going to set it up in the same way that I did mine here. So the first line, I'm going to do insert merge field, first name, last name. The second row, I'm going to do insert merge field. In this particular thing, I don't have the school or their degree or their company name. So I'm just going to start right away with their address. The next line then, I want it to be just like we have here, city, comma, space, state, and then the zip code. So I'll do insert merge field, city. If I want those spaces or commas between these different areas, I can add those in. So I can say city, comma, space, state, space, zip. And then lastly, if I want their email address, then I can do an insert and zip. Okay, so again, we're just in the design mode right now, but if I do preview results, then I can see each individual's information. So how this works is that it shows you record by record. So right now, this is just the first record. This is Kendra's here. But if I want to see the rest of the records to see how they're laid out in this letter format, at the top next to this preview results, there is an area where you can toggle through the rest of the pages. So I can say view the next record, there's Penny, Lena, and I can keep going and I can proof all, or I can just go to the end and make sure that it's pulling in the last person, whatever I want to do there. Now the other thing I can do, I'm going to take preview results off because it's looking the way that I want. The other thing is I don't want this table border to show. So you have a couple of options. I can select the entire table and I can come up to the design tab here And what you can do is you can either turn off the borders, so I can say no border, or I could give it a different color. So the background of my paper is going to be white. So my pen color is white, and I can do all borders, and then it has a white border, and so it's invisible, but it still has that nice spacing so that it looks like I set up my tabs and did something really special here. So when I go back to mailings and preview, then I have the nice spacing between each of the recipient's information and the sender's information on the right-hand side. Okay, so I want to pause. Any questions for me? If we are good to move on to talk about finishing this particular file, click the yes button. If you have a question, raise your hand. Cool. Cool. Okay, one more question then. I'm going to have Susie clear the responses. One more question. Does this seem less intimidating to create? The yes button for if you think so. Cool. All right. Okay, so this is creating letters. When I'm done with this, when I've completed everything here, there's this option that says finish and merge. And you have some options here. So I can edit the individual, I can send email, but what I want to do here is actually want to print these out to get ready to be mailed. So when I do print documents, you can either choose to print all of them, or you can print the current record or, a selection of them and click OK. And then it'll have you select a printer. However, what we would suggest doing before you actually print these to an MFD is to print them to an Adobe PDF. And that way you can save an individual copy of each one of these files as a PDF. It just helps that if in the end I need to go back and print one file, then I can find it just as an Adobe PDF and print it out that way. So it just makes it a little bit easier and gives you a copy of that. So we would suggest printing to PDF first, and then you can print to the MFD of your choice. I do have a couple of things to keep in mind about printing these, and that just again is the reminder to create that PDF copy of each of your letters and save that. And again, just so that if you need to go back and print just one of them, it's easier to search the saved PDF files. Okay, so that is creating a letter. Another scenario that you may have is you may need to create personalized email messages. So a couple of ways that you could create these. One is that in the body of the email message is the information that the employee needs. Another way that you could create this is that you need to attach a PDF, and then the body of the email will say something else. This also assumes that you have that existing list, including those email addresses, in the Excel file. So again, with an email, let me bring up what the final result will be here. It's going to be pretty similar to our letters. In the actual Word document, we're not going to be able to see really much of a difference, but I'm going to bring that up just so you can see it, what the final goal is here. Okay, so the final goal is that this will be addressed to each individual person, and this couple paragraphs of information will be in the body of the email message, and it will be signed from me in the School of Awesome. So this is our final result. If I go through the preview here, it's going to have addressed to each of those individual 10 people. Okay, So again, we're going to start with a brand new document from scratch. I'm just going to copy this to use for the new file. So I'm going to do File, New, Blank Document, and I'm going to type in the static information, the information that's going to be repeated on every single email. So I'm going to start with Dear, and then I'm going to paste in the email message that I want to send. All right, so now I need to connect this to my list file. So I'm going to click on Mailings, select Recipients, use an existing list. And I'm going to browse to and select my file and click Open. And I'm going to use the sheet one. It's the only one that I have, and I want to make sure that this is selected at the bottom for the first row of data contains column headers. And I'm going to click OK. Now, the only two things that I want to use from this are the name field, and I want to use the email field so that it knows who to email. So I just want the name field to be after Dear, so I'm going to do a space after Dear. I'm going to say insert merge field, and this time I just want it to be their first name. So I'm going to choose first name. To see the actual contents, so again, remember this is just going to be the column name when we're not in preview mode, but when I click preview results, then I'll be able to see the information addressed to each individual person. And if I wanted to, I could go back and I could add my comma after first name, and I could preview those results and see what that looks like. Cool. Okay, so I'm ready to send the email. There's a couple of ways to do this. If this is going to be the body of the email message, I don't need to attach anything. Then under Finish and Merge, I can say Send Email Messages. The To area is where you're going to select that field or that column in your data that contains the email addresses. Mine happens to be the column that's titled Email. So wherever you have those email addresses. All right, the subject line I'm going to put for this is, I'm going to do sample mail merge. You could enter whatever you wanted. You have a few options for the mail format. HTML is the default, but you could also send this as plain text. You could send this as an attachment here. The only downside to sending this as an attachment from this option is that there's no place for you to actually then type the body of the email. It just sends as a blank email message with an attachment. So I'll show you a different way to do that. So I would suggest either choosing HTML or plain text here. I'm going to leave it just as HTML. And again, just like we saw before, I can do all records. I'm going to do current record here for the sake of showing you this example. As soon as you click OK, it sends the email messages. So when I click OK, the email is sent. And I don't get any sort of like confirmation or anything in Word. What it does is it sends it through your personal email account. And so here's that sample mail merge because I sent everything just to me. So here's what it looks like for the recipient. I get information addressed to me, Dear Gail, and I have those two paragraphs of information, and it's signed from Tennille. Now, as the sender, if I wanted to see and make sure that each of these were sent to all of my 10 recipients, and if I choose Sent Items, I'm going to see those sample mail merge files that I sent. So I just did the one, right? I just did the one current record. But if all 10 or all 50 or whatever, you can check that each of those were sent under the Sent Items. Okay. So a couple of things about sending the email. I mentioned that you could you could do this as an attachment. Under the finish and merge, when you do the send email messages, there's the attachment option. But again, I would suggest not doing it in this way. If this needs to be an attachment and I need to send other information to them, what I would suggest doing is under mailings, choosing merge to Adobe PDF. When you choose this merge to Adobe PDF, again, you can choose the records that you want to merge, and that what it does is it will create a PDF file from either the current record or all of the records that you have here. The other thing, though, that you can do is you can say automatically send Adobe PDF files by email. And when you do this, again, I select wherever those email addresses are, so email, and maybe I would give this file a different name. So I'm going to say like sample, or I'm going to say info for students. When I send this as an Adobe PDF file, I can still add a subject. So I can say important school information. And I also get the opportunity to add in an actual body of the email message. So I can say, hello, I've attached important information regarding the cruise you won. And then when I click OK, the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to ask me to save this PDF file, because it does two things, right? It creates the PDF file for you, and because I did the email options, it sends that PDF as an attachment. So I'm going to click OK. It's going to ask me where I want to save the PDF files. If you want to create a new folder at this point, you can create a new folder. I'm just going to save it to my desktop and click OK. So it's going to take just a little bit because it's going to save the PDF and then it's going to send it. The nice thing about the PDF thing is that it does give you a confirmation that your emails are sent. So remember the other one, when I did it, it just sent, and I didn't really have an idea until I went back to my sent items in Outlook. With the PDF option, it does give you this confirmation, which is kind of nice. So I can click OK, and it might take just a little bit longer to receive. We'll see here. But eventually, I should get an email message with that attachment. While we are waiting for that, questions for me on creating these emails to be sent out to every person on your list. No for no questions. If you have a question, choose yes, or you can raise your hand. Cool. Okay, another question while we're waiting for this next email to roll in. So far, are you more likely to create the mail merge letters or more likely to create the emails? And you can just chat in the message. So letters or emails? Emails, cool. Letters. All right, so kind of some of each. So it looks like I did all 10 of those records, not just the current. So you can see all 10 of those emails rolled in. Here's the email along with the information that I had about the cruise. And if I open this PDF, it's going to be addressed specifically to that person about their awesome cruise information that they won. So a couple of ways to send out those email messages. Okay, so again, just some tips on things to keep in mind if you're sending out the email messages. One is that as soon as you send that file from the mail merge, As soon as I click OK from the field where I do finish and merge, send email messages, as soon as I click OK here, it's sent and I don't get the confirmation. To check it out, remember, go to your Outlook sent items and you'll see all of those files that were sent through the mail merge. Also, this sends from your personal account in Outlook. If you want to send from a department account instead, then you will want to talk with your tech support staff and you'll want to talk with them in advance so that they can help get this set up for you so that you can send from the department account instead of someone's personal email account. And then the last thing is just that same message I talked about here, that if you want to be able to send an attachment and include a message in the body, use the PDF, the merge to PDF option instead. Otherwise, if you just send the email as an attachment, you don't get to type in the, hey, here's the important information about the cruise that you won. Okay, so last scenario here for today is that you need to create address labels. And you need an address label for each past student. And then again, the same assumption is that you have that existing list of those addresses in Excel. Okay, so the final result, let me pull that up here. The final result is that, oops, don't save. Our final results is that we have one file with each of the addresses listed, with the main goal being I didn't have to type all of these, but that it's pulled from my existing list. So this is the one scenario that I mentioned that up to now we've been just creating blank Word files and using that to create our emails and the letters. If you're creating labels, what you want to start out with is under mailings. So we're going to start under mailings. We're going to say start mail merge, and we're going to choose the labels option. So let me create a new file here so that it doesn't confuse this one. Okay, so I'm going to open up Word. I know I want to create labels, so I'm going to go to mailings, start mail merge, labels. When you do this, it actually lets you choose the label that you've purchased. And so there's a lot of label vendors listed here. There's Office Depot. There's also like the Avery labels, or I think Ace is another popular one. So you can choose the brand of labels that you have, and then you can select by the product number of what you have. So Office Depot have quite a few of these. So let me scroll down here to the address portion. Okay, so I'm going to say that this is the label that I bought. They're 1 inch high and they're 2.63 inches, and the page size is 8.5 by 11. So this information should be like on the box or the bag of labels that you buy. It should have the vendor, Office Depot, Avery, etc., and then the label number. You can also create a new label if you need to, but it's much easier to start from this. Okay, so when I click OK, it's going to lay out my page and create a table that's the exact same layout as the labels that I've purchased. And so this just helps save you time and frustration of having to figure out how these are going to be printed out. All right. So what we did next is that we want to pull in our recipients. So we're going to choose select recipients. We're going to choose use an existing list. And I'm going to browse to the list that I have. I'm going to select the sheet 1 because it's all I have. And then I want to make sure that this is selected because my first row does contain those column names, and click OK. Okay, so what this does here is that it puts in this next record information. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, but I want to show you another way to enter this address information. So when we entered the address information for our letters, we did insert merge field, we did first name, last name, then we pressed enter, we entered in the address, and then enter, and we entered in the rest of the stuff. You can absolutely still do that, but you can also enter in something called an address block. If I choose address block, this automatically matches the fields that you would use for an address, like the name and the postal address. And so you can see how this is going to be formatted, and I can choose how I want the name to appear on this. If I just want it to be Kendra, if I'm collecting information like junior or senior, if I have, a spouse name as well, if I have, if it's going to a family, whatever, I can choose how those names appear. And so this is kind of a nice option. If you're looking at this preview and it doesn't look right, it's not pulling in the names correctly, or it doesn't understand what the address is, you may just have to choose this match fields option. Usually the ones I've done by default, it matches them pretty well, but this just helps you match what column in your data is where your last names are. So the column that contains the last name in my data is the last name column. The column that contains the address information is the address column. So if you notice that things aren't pulling in correctly, or if you do happen to have things like the department, but it's listed as job or something like that, then you can always go back through and match the column from your data to this information here. Okay, so mine's pulling in correctly. So I'm going to click OK. This is the address block. So it just gives you the one line. Okay, so at this point, if I preview my results, all I have is Kendra's. I don't have the rest of the addresses listed here. So the first thing that I could try is I can highlight this address block, I can copy it, and I can paste it into the rest of these labels. Okay, so I have address block pasted into all these labels. If I do preview results this time, it has Kendra's information repeating in every single address label, which is not what I want. I want an address label for each of those 10 people. So what you have to do for this sort of thing, because it's located on the same page, you have to add in what's called a rule to tell it that before the next address block, before it puts that information in, to move to the next record, to move to the next line of your data. So you do that by, after address block here, you choose rules, next record. And what that does then when I preview is you can see here it's moved from Kendra to Penny. But we have to have that next record after each of the address blocks. So I can highlight my next address block, a next record, maybe here, here we go. I can copy this and then I can paste it in. So I have my address block followed by next record, and I'm putting it in every single one of the cells, and these cells represent the individual labels that I'm creating. So now when I preview, I get my 10 records, and they're all those individual records. Okay, so let me show you that again. Let's do undo a couple of times here. Okay, so when we started out with this, we entered in our address block. And we did that by clicking address block and choosing the information that we wanted to include. So we're including the names in the format of their first name, last name, and we're adding in the postal address. And then I always keep this checked too. It just says to format the address. So, okay. If we leave this as is, because remember when we created the labels, these next records showed up in every cell. If I preview, all I have is that one record. So I have to be able to add this address block to every single one of these individual cells. So I'm going to just copy this address block and I'm going to paste it into all of these cells. The only problem with this is that when I preview the results, I only have the one individual. I'm only seeing stuff for Kendra. So previously, we had a separate page for each recipient. And so the file knew that for Kendra got one page. When I clicked next, it created a new letter or a new email with Penny's information. However, because we have the information all on one page, we have to add in what's called a rule here so that it knows before it fills in the address block information, it has to look down to the next record. So after it fills in Kendra's information, it needs to move down and move to the next record, which is Penny's information. And then after Penny, it needs to go to the next record, which is Lena, and so on and so forth. All right, so after address block here, I need to enter in what's called a rule. And under the rules, I say next record. Now when I copy and paste the address block plus the next record, oops, and I copy in, paste the next record, and I preview the results, it now has Kendra, then goes to the next record, which is Penny, then goes to the next record, which is Lena, then goes to the next record, which is Eric, and so on and so forth. And that's how we're getting those multiple addresses all listed on one page. Okay, so pause here. Questions on creating these labels. No for no questions, yes, or raise your hand or type in the chat, whatever you'd like to do for questions. Okay. When you're done with the labels, then you can do your finish and merge, and you can print these to your MFD file. I do want to bring up this slide, though, because I have some information about printing these labels. So one is that you want to make sure before you create your mail merge file that you know the type of label and the style that you're using. If you do need help printing labels, you can always talk to your tech support staff in advance, and they'll help set this stuff up for you. One tip that I have here is if you print the same labels all the time and they have the exact same settings, so if I'm always using that Office Depot label and I'm always using the same settings for that, you can talk with your tech support staff and they can set up what's called a print queue. And the print queue is just an easier way for you to print these same things over and over again. What you do is you have to know the settings that you're using. So like the label settings that you're using, you'll give the print queue a name. Like I might say student addresses, address labels 2018, and then you also tell them where you want to be able to print this file, and they can help set up this print queue for you. So again, it's really helpful if you print the same labels over and over again with the same settings. Okay, so last concept here, if I need to make a change to my list, what do I need to do? So I need to add in another person. We'll say that's the change. If I have everything open like I do now, I have the file, I have that label file open, I want to save this first. So I'm going to do File, Save As. I'm going to save this here, it's fine. Okay, so I'm going to save the Word file, and then I want to close the Word file. Next, you're going to open Excel. So I have that open. I'm going to make whatever changes. So I'm going to add in Susie Johannes, 450 Mulberry Lane. This isn't her exact address either, in case you wanted to send her like a fruit bouquet or anything. It won't actually go to Susie. So I'll say Kansas 66045, and we'll leave it at that. Okay, so I've made changes to this file. I've added. It could also be that Kendra's last name changed, so it's no longer Kendra Campaign, it's Kendra Marks. So I could also make that change here. Okay, so then I would just save this file. So it's saved, and I'm going to go ahead and just close the Excel workbook as well. Okay, so we've made the changes. Now I need to open up that mail merge file. So here it is. It's the session example. Now, when you open up Word documents with mail merge, it gives you this option. It says opening this document will run the following SQL command. And it's just telling you it's going to select, because we have that connection between your workbook and the connection between this document. And so that's what this is. So you want to make sure that you choose yes. Otherwise, it doesn't make that connection to your actual database or to your list in Excel. So I want to choose yes. And as soon as I do that, you can see that my changes are made. So Kendra Marks now appears instead of Kendra Campaign, and Susie is listed at the bottom here as well. So I don't have to do anything else special. I usually, just because I like to double check, if I'm creating letters, I will go to the last record if I've added someone new and just make sure that they're listed there, or I'll browse to the person that I made changes for in their record just to make sure, but it should just update automatically for you. All right, so last thing here, and then I'll open the session for any last questions. If you have questions about creating these mail merge files or using any other of the Microsoft Word tools, you can contact our technology, instruction, and engagement team at ty@ku.edu, or you can call us at 785-864-5155. If you're having technical difficulties or you have questions about installing Microsoft Office, you can contact our IT Customer Service Center. And then again, if you need help printing with your MFD, or if you want to set up any of those print queues, you can contact your tech support staff and they'll be able to help set that up for you. All right, so last slide of the day, I'm going to open the floor up for any questions. You can either chat to me in the chat if you have questions, or you can open your microphone. If you don't have any questions, this is the end of our session. So thank you all for joining me today, and I'll stick around for a little bit for those of you that may have questions.